Welcome to I Have a Voice. I'm Dean Sinceri. This is my lovely wife, Holly Kim Sinceri,
Hi, guys.
life coach.
Yes.
So, we have a topic today that's really important. It's called trauma triggers. Yeah, trauma triggers. We're going to go into exactly what is a trauma trigger. We're going to explain that to you. And then, even better, the second half, we're going to show you how to overcome those and how to recover so they no longer impact your present day life. So, you've dealt with trauma a long time,
Yes.
huh?
Poster child.
I'm talking about helping people.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I was thought you meant, did I have any trauma in my life? Yes, lots of trauma in my life, and yes, lots of work on myself, and yes, lots helping people with trauma.
And have come over it in a remarkable way.
Thank you, honey.
Yeah, you really have. So we're going to jump right in. Let's talk about what is trauma. Uh, Trauma is an injury that causes severe physical, psychological, or both. The injury could cause physical, it could be a physical trauma, it could be a psychological trauma, it could be a combination, and it activates a survival response.
Yeah.
That's very important to understand is that trauma always activates a survival response. We'll go into that deeper and what that means for you if you've experienced trauma and what are some of those common reactions. What is a trigger? Just listen carefully to this. A trigger is a sensory experience. The senses like you smell, you taste, you touch, you feel, you see. It's a sensory experience, a smell, a taste, an audio, a visual, a perception that causes emotional and psychological recall of a traumatic experience. And it reactivates the survival response. Let's go through that again because we're breaking it down to make it really simple. But a trigger is when you have a sensory experience and it makes you recall the traumatic event, and not only the traumatic event, but also the emotional and psychological experience of that. And it reactivates you into a survival response. Oftentimes, when we experience triggers, the thing that's causing the trigger is not the same level of the reaction that we have to the trigger. Give you an example. A young boy was 8 years old and his house burned down, and it was very traumatic. He lost his entire house. 15, 20 years later, he smells smoke in somebody's house. It might have been a roast burning, something I would do. Food burning and causing smoke in the house. And the minute the man now smells smoke inside of a house, he gets triggered, and on an emotional level, it brings back the memory of the fire. And he has literally a physical response to that. And the friend might be saying, look, I just overcooked the roast. What's the big deal? No, it triggered a response. And there's many things that can trigger. When I say sensory, it could be colors. It could be something that you just perceive. It could be a taste. It could be a word. It could be an audio message. What's interesting is the place that gets activated when we get into survival response, the limbic system. It has a direct line to your sense of smell, which is interesting. Oftentimes people will report that certain smells that they were not aware of triggers a trauma. They don't know it's triggering a trauma, and they have what they call an anxiety attack. So trauma triggers are, that's breaking down really what is a trauma trigger. And we're going to go into a little deeper, just another level of what is, in a sense, what are the three common responses? You can jump in anytime. I know
Okay.
you're just listening. Uh, Whenever we experience trauma, it activates what we call the limbic system, and that's our survival system. And there's a part of our brain that's evolved, that's our logical part. And there's a part that carries our emotional life, our emotional response, especially strong emotional responses. We call that the limbic system. When the limbic system is triggered, we go from logical, relaxed place to survival mode. And these are the three common responses when the limbic system is triggered. Is I used to think it was just two, but realized recently it's actually three. There's fight, that you fight against, you feel threatened and you begin to fight. And oftentimes anger and rage is accompanying that response. And I'm going after it and I'm defending myself. Has that ever happened to you in your marriage when when your spouse said something and you got into survival fight mode and later said, I can't believe I did that, right? And so fight is one of the options. The second one is flight. Flight is when I just withdraw and run away from whatever is bothering me, whatever the stimulus is. And when the limbic system gets activated, I can get into a flight mode. And accompanying that is usually fear or terror. And the third response, which kind of discovered recently or understood recently, is freeze. Sometimes when you experience trauma, you don't fight, you don't fly, but there's this release in your body and you're actually
Paralyzed.
become paralyzed.
Mhm.
You become frozen.
That's why people can't scream when they're being traumatized a lot of times. And people want to know, why didn't you scream? Why didn't you scream out?
Yeah,
Because you freeze.
because you freeze.
Yeah.
Exactly. So those are three common responses that we have. And I'm just trying to break down physiologically for you what happens so that you understand, if you've had some kind of trauma in the past, that you've internalized that experience. And sometimes you get triggered and that will come to the surface. Holly Kim and I have done trauma work for years and years. And we use a different language or a different approach to talk about the very same thing. And we find it's easier for our clients to understand and work through it. And
Mhm.
so we have developed a concept that we call the voices within, but we divide the self into three parts,
Mhm.
right? When you're talking about trauma triggers, the wounded child is the part of you. We personify that part of you. And that's the part of you that carries the memory of the trauma.
Mhm.
We also characterize the part of you that is your survival response, that either fights, flies, or what?
Freezes.
Freezes.
Mhm.
And we call that what?
The protector.
The protector. And then we have the third part, which is the true self or the spirit, or what we believe is the part of you that has been untouched by the trauma.
Yeah.
We believe there's a part inside of you that no matter what you experience in life
Mm-hmm.
has been untouched.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know you have something to say about this, huh?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, one of the things is that the part that has been traumatized, um, the true self is that didn't the the true self is always there. It's where when we were born, and through that process is that the true self you cannot take that away. It can be smothered from due to trauma. It can be smothered through the response of trying to survive. But when we do our work, what truly emerges is our true self. That's what comes out. And a lot of times when I'm working with somebody, they'll be like, well, what if there is no true self? No, you wouldn't be here. The true self will emerge, and it's not damaged. It's your authentic self, who you really are. And the reason why we have a protector, a protection internally, is to protect that. And it goes another step to protect myself from being hurt again. What me, myself, and I, it's the I that I'm trying to protect. And um me is the wounded self, myself is the protector self. So I'm trying to protect myself, my internal self. So it's like, in that, as I am doing my work and coming through, back through the trauma, all of a sudden, what emerges is what was always there, what I've always loved, what I always cared about, what I always wanted to connect to, what I always wanted to see, what I always wanted to experience. What brings you joy is just waiting for you. So this is why we do the work, to get through the process, not because somebody's like, you just want me to cry, in session. No, I allow you to cry. I make it a safe place for you to cry. But the goal is to get to the I self, to get to the true self, so you can be authentic, so you can be real, so you can touch all of the things that you've had to protect, to not be continuously lost.
Yeah. You see,
Sorry.
there's a common clinical term called post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yes.
What is that? Well, in our language, it means that something happens that triggers my wounded child and my protective response that takes over, and who I really am gets lost.
Yes.
If I remember a fellow that I worked with years and years ago, probably 30 years ago, he was a Vietnam vet. And, he experienced all the things in Vietnam, was traumatized by that. And I remember he was probably in his late 30s, early 40s. And there was a helicopter that flew over the place that we were. And he literally balled up under a table and was shaking, and he was hiding under a table.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, he was back in Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
just by the sound and the visualization of a helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
And
That happened to my dad.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And he was back there. And so he was no longer in his 40-year-old body.
Right.
His consciousness was back as a 18, 20-year-old young man
Mm-hmm.
in Vietnam, hiding from the enemy and hiding under a table.
Yeah.
And so it shows that when trauma triggers get activated,
Yeah.
we actually go back to an earlier stage, and our mind and our intellect and who we are regresses to that
Mm-hmm.
earlier state.
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard right now. I mean, maybe some of you knew about all the trauma that Johnny went through and all the stuff. I didn't really know Amber Heard that well, but all the things that have gone through in childhood, and then playing that out on one another, is horrific. And it's really sad to watch for us anyway.
Yeah.
And that they're suffering so much from the trauma of trying to protect themselves from the past that appears to be very much in front of them. And it's just the replaying of that. It's really, traumatic and sad. And, you can see the true self at times, and you can hear it, and you can see the work that they've done and all that, as far as being actors or whatever. But it's like, how sad to have to live in such a situation over your marriage,
Yeah.
in your family life.
Yeah. Let's look at recovery from trauma triggers. We're going to take you through 3 steps of recovery. And if you've experienced trauma triggers and you're working through that, we're going to walk you through a process of what you need to do in order to fully recover. Step one is that you need to become aware of and understand your survival response. We say identify your protector. We personify that part of you and separate it from who you really are, and it makes it easier to identify it.
Right.
There's a survival response that each one of us have to trauma, but this applies to any hurts in life.
Yes.
If I was betrayed by a girlfriend and I'm wondering why I'm so possessive of my wife and why she's why I'm always wanting to look at her phone. Well, that may not be about my wife. That may be about the past experience of being betrayed and it's not being resolved.
Exactly.
And so my protector response, my survivor response might believe you can't trust women, and true self, who I really am, knows that my wife is trustworthy. So we begin to identify what is your survival response, what gets activated when you get triggered, and what does that look like? And you need to be aware of that, how it thinks, what happens in your body when that takes over, and how it's different than who you are.
Exactly. If not, you'll be completely controlled your whole life.
Yeah.
By your own way of wanting to protect yourself. And then everybody judges you for that part of you versus who you really are. You know?
Yeah, it's really easy to see. Sometimes people deal with trauma by dissociating from their body and from their emotions. But don't you know that's a setup for drug addiction and alcoholism? Because I start using a behavior that helps me what? Dissociate and separate from my emotions and from my body. And in that engaging in that behavior, I'm moving into a survival behavior, and that behavior is causing more problems in my life.
You know, I was talking about this in session yesterday, day before, and you know, I don't have I've been sober for 39 years. I don't have the ability to just dissociate. That's what makes me alcoholic and drug addict, because I need a substance to dissociate. I just can't dissociate just, you know, I mean, I can watch a TV show and it goes away for a little while, but I'll probably get triggered during the TV show. So it really doesn't work that well. You know, it's like I need this substance. So for me, like, that's just not an option. I can't, you know, I can't use, because I don't know how to, well, I do know how to stop, but it's a lot of control. So that's not healthy. In that, it's, you know, just seeing that, I was thinking about that. We're just speaking in a session that this is what, you know, this is why I'm like that, because it's like I can't just dissociate. I need drugs and alcohol to really sedate me.
Yeah. So the first step is to identify your survival behaviors, or what we call a protector.
Yes.
Step two is recovering from trauma triggers, is in a safe atmosphere.
Safe is the word.
Safe is very important.
Yes.
Debriefing the story of the trauma.
Yeah.
Externalizing the emotions.
Yes.
Or what we would call giving the wounded child a voice. You know, Moses and I had a traumatic experience a couple of weeks back. We were swimming in the Gulf and we got caught up in a riptide, and it was really touch life and death situation where, you know, we were not making any headway. He was exhausted. He thought he was going to die. You know, I was telling him he's going to live. I mean, it was just, we were able to work out of it. Thank God, with God's help. You know, Holly Kim was on the beach.
I was traumatized myself.
Yeah. And she was screaming, Jesus, you know,
Jesus.
Look, the Lord helped us and literally saved us.
Yes. He doesn't just save souls. Thank God.
Delivered us from that. But, you know, we knew that was a traumatic experience for us. I mean, it was, this adrenaline kicked in. We survived. By the time we got to the beach, we were both so exhausted. I mean, we just fell on the beach. But we knew that our body was carrying this trauma. And we knew that we needed to debrief once we got safe. And so a couple of days later, you know, we contacted a group of our friends and said, look, we need to do a Zoom call where y'all be on with us. We need to debrief this experience. And we just started telling the story. We had to get the experience out of our body and emotionally. I mean, I was crying, Holly Kim was crying. We were just telling the story. And not only were we speaking the story, but the emotions connected to that story were being externalized. And it started moving us into a healing process. And so, step 2 is that you don't debrief the story while you're still in the trauma.
No.
Because you need to be in your survival behavior.
Right.
But once you are out of the trauma,
right,
and you're dealing with the after effects, that's when you need to find a safe place to debrief. I mean, that's why oftentimes people come to counseling or coaching, is that it's a safe place where they can debrief their stories, they can tell it, they can be validated, it can be loved through it. And it's our job is to help do that. But, that could be done in counseling, that could be done with a group of friends, that could be done with your spouse, a loving spouse. It can be done in a number of different ways. But what's important is that you need to tell the story.
Yeah.
We know that from post-traumatic stress disorder with the military. They call it debriefing. What does debriefing mean?
Right.
You tell the story of what happened. You start to get it out of your system. You start to give voice to it. And, we teach that you can get it out of your system in a number of different ways. I can literally speak to someone that loves me. I can draw it. I can write about it. I can journal.
Sing about it.
Can sing about it, give some type of creative expression to it. And in doing so, I'm getting the trauma out of my body.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I was going to say, the other thing that you had on there was no sense of time and things in symbols. After this experience that we just experienced, the possible drowning, we come back and we were in Florida, we come back home and we're watching the Pels, the Pelicans, they're in the playoffs and everything. And almost, or it felt like to me anyway, almost every commercial was a beach. So I'm watching Snoop on the beach, and I'm thinking, oh my God, but I don't see Snoop on the beach, right? I see Dean and Moses drowning in the water on the beach. Then the next commercial is about going to the Bahamas. It's the beach. It was like, oh my goodness. But I just kept, at that point, I'm seeing them drowning at the beach. I'm not seeing the commercial with Snoop on the beach or the vacation on the beach.
Yeah.
So it's no sense of time. It's like I was there all over again, knowing, because I understand this, I knew what it was, I knew what I needed to do and, start processing and that kind of thing. So it's like, there it is. No sense of time. It was just like it was happening just now. And the symbol was seeing the beach on the TV.
Yeah. When you say, that's a good point, because no sense of time really means that, going back to the example, that boy in the fire at 8 years old, he doesn't know the difference. The part of him that carries his pain, what we call the wounded child, doesn't know the difference between 8 years old, 15 years old, 20 years old, and 40 years old. It transcends time. And when the symbol gets triggered, the smell of smoke in a house, when that gets triggered, it all comes back. It's like the entire memory gets released in the body. If you've struggled with panic attacks, most often this is what a panic attack is.
Yep.
Is that you experience a trigger.
Most of the time they don't know it.
But you're not intellectually aware of the trigger.
Right.
The young man, the man could have smelled smoke and went into a panic attack, but didn't put it together with the fact that it reminded him of the smoke.
Right.
Of
almost losing his life, his home, and everything else when he's 8 years old.
Someone could have been perpetrated either sexually or physically or some way. And the person that did could have been wearing a certain perfume.
Yeah.
And years later, you could come across that scent and go into a terror type experience. But you don't know it was the scent that triggered it, but your body has a memory of it. The trauma trigger occurred, but you don't intellectually put the pieces together. And all of a sudden your heart's racing, your hands are sweating, you're freezing up, you lose your voice, and you go into a freeze position.
And that's exactly what happens. You lose your voice. That's why it's all about I have a voice, is to have a voice about things that matter.
Yes. So we want to encourage you, find a safe place
Yes.
to debrief experiences that you have. We're talking specifically about trauma today, but it's even those things that are hurtful or painful that you wouldn't put in the category of trauma. It's the same thing, it's just different grades of it. The more unresolved trauma you have, the stronger you're going to be in your survival responses. And the more we're going to miss you,
Yeah.
of who you really are.
Right.
You know, they say that the opposite of love is not hate, the opposite of love is fear.
Exactly.
When I'm in my survival response, I'm living in fear.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm living in my true self, of my spirit, I walk in love. So when I get my trauma triggered, I move into the trauma and I move into my survival response of fear, and I'm no longer being a loving human being.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so important to learn to manage our triggers. It's so much bigger than just, you know, thinking that it's a small thing. It's really big. So let's go to step 3. So step 1 is to be aware of your survivor responses. Step 2 is to tell the story of the trauma. And step 3 is it's empower your true self or your spirit.
Mm-hmm.
This is recovery from trauma triggers. And how do you empower your true self or your spirit? Well, prayer is one way. When you pray, you hook up with the spirit,
Yep.
and it empowers who you are in your spirit. Meditation is a little different than prayer, but it's a form of prayer. You know, meditating on a spiritual truth and getting that in your mind, in your
Yep.
heart. I love, you know, being a follower of Jesus. I read his writings a lot. I meditate on what he's taught. Uh, you know, he says, oh, "Do not be afraid, only believe."
Mm-hmm.
You know, that can be a meditation that I chew on all day. That becomes part of my consciousness. Is that I just go over it over and over again, and it starts to go from my mind down into my heart and infiltrate my heart. That it's so important to practice and build up the what we call a true self,
Yeah.
or the spirit. Another way, and perhaps you can talk about this, Halikim, is affirmations. What are
Right.
affirmations? How do they help build up our spirit?
Well, there's a lot of different ways to do affirmations. We've done them, and I've done them many different ways. Is affirmation is saying a statement as though it already is. So to say, I am healthy. Let's say I'm in a healing crisis and working and dealing with something that is attacking my body. Um, Instead of saying I'm sick, you say I am healthy. I am healthy. I am healthy. You write it. I am healthy. I am healthy. I am healthy. I am lean. I am strong. I am beautiful. I am wealthy. I am loving. I am kind. And in the I am, you starting to bring it from the front lobe to the back lobe down to the spirit. So to get something in, to push it from the front of your brain to the back of your brain to your spirit and your soul takes a lot of work. If you have a belief system that says I'm stupid, I'm ugly, I'm fat, I'm this, I'm that, that you hear more in your brain than you hear the other side. So and you're always saying I'm afraid, so i am I am courageous, I am loving, I am kind, I am beautiful, I am wealthy, I am an inventor. You start to say those things, and really the I am is God. I am who I am. I am what I am. That God can be whatever you need him to be at that time. That's in Exodus, right, with Moses. Yes. So through that process, that you can write it. In our book, we talk about how to do affirmations and how to write them. But in the writing, we used to, old school, we used to have a cassette player in our car, and we made a cassette, but you can do it on your phone to record those where you say them over and over, and then you listen to them. You listen to your own voice, because when you hear your own voice in your ear, it works a lot better than hearing somebody else's voice. So when you make them out of your own voice and you hear them and you repeat them, it can get in there a lot quicker than hearing somebody else tell you this. So because you want to hear your voice saying, I am healthy, I am loved, I am kind, I am giving, I am um, courageous. So in that process, by really pushing that down, you become a winner, you become an overcomer, as they sing in the, on the radio. I am an overcomer.
So the 3 steps
Mm-hmm.
is identify your survival response
Exactly.
and understand it, externalize it, understand when it takes over. Number 2, tell the story of the trauma, give voice to what we call the wounded child. And third is to empower the true self.
And we have a book that tells you how to do all of that.
Yes.
Oh, there it is.
So it's a step-by-step guide
Yes,
to
it is.
recovery from trauma triggers. We have a book called A Roadmap to the Soul. There's a link in the description of this podcast. No, it's not a podcast, but
It's a YouTube.
a YouTube. And anyway, we go into a lot more depth about how to overcome and resolve trauma triggers.
Yes.
We have a step-by-step process of walking you through a process of how to do it at a deeper level. The second thing is that we have practical exercise. It's just not a theoretical book. It's a book that gives you answer these questions, share it with another person, do this, do that. And then it also will give you a deeper understanding of what we've introduced you to. Look, our heart is that we want you to be free.
Yes.
We want you to be the person that God has intended you to be.
Yes.
We want you to be, we want you to fulfill the destiny and the purpose that God has on your life.
And to be loved and to love all the people that you want to love.
Yes.
And have inner peace.
And you can only do that if you're able to work through the painful parts of your past, specifically as if it's been traumatic.
Yes.
The other thing I want to mention is you could also go to our website, I Have a Voice. You can purchase the book there. Yeah. It's available. But look, if you're struggling with some traumatic experience and you hasn't really felt resolved for you, look, get the book. It's going to help you walk you through the process. And certainly there's a number of other different videos that we have on I Have a Voice that will be helpful for you to work through different things. But we really thank you for joining us today. We want you to be free. We want you to have the freedom to love. We want you to have the freedom to fulfill your divine purpose and to be the person that you have been designed to be.
Yes.
So God bless, and we say,